Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the recently engaged youngster, Kevin Cunningham. Congratulations, buddy. You did it. You bought the ring, you popped the question, and she actually said yes. She actually said yes. And we kind of figured that was going to happen because you kind of live there. So you kind of figured that was pretty much a done deal once you bought the ring, huh? But how do you feel? You're engaged now. You're an engaged man.
I know. It's crazy. You're correct, though. I mean, we've been dating for over 2.5 years, so it's not some crazy soon amount. It's not like we've been dating for 9 years either, but we've been dating for a while now. We've lived together for over a year, and we moved into her parents' place, like you said, back in January. So, I mean, none of this is exactly a huge surprise to anyone. It's something we've been talking about, but finally sealed the deal on Saturday, like you said, Troy. So, got a big rock for, of course, with the millions of dollars that I make every year, partially doing this show. I kind of kid on that one, but I am a very rich man, so I'm also kidding there. But finally, I'm engaged. I'll shut up now about that.
Yeah, well, if they say you have to spend, 3 months' salary, if you based it off this show, then you would have probably had to go to the gumball machine and just pick her up one of those cubic zirconias out of the gumball machine. Or you could have just got her a gumball one, and when she gets mad, she just eat it and then say, "Hey, I'm mad at you. Go buy me another ring." So anyway, we got a lot to talk about today. College football, Kevin, it is starting, Big Ten football, and that is going to consume this show from today, probably all the way up until, November, December, maybe even longer. Who knows? But it is time for college football. Can't wait. We've been talking on and off about it. We've been talking about recruiting classes for 2070. We've been talking about all kinds of recruiting classes. Now we get to talk about the season. 2017 season kicks off. Big Ten, first game, Thursday night, Ohio State, Indiana. We were talking about it. Kind of odd that game number one for both teams is against a conference opponent. You don't see that very often, Kevin, but, what are your thoughts here? You're an Ohio State guy. Let's just start there. Let's start with Ohio State, Indiana, Thursday night.
Yeah, I'm curious about the game, obviously, because I'm a Buckeye guy. For football, I'm very selective in which teams I like. I'll like the Celtics, I'll like Duke, I'll like Ohio State, and then I'll like the Titans for the NFL. So I'm really all over the place. But Ohio State football is something I pay particular attention to. Like I've mentioned on this show numerous times, I do work for Land of 10, landof10.com. You can follow them on Twitter at Land of 10. That's your go-to all Big Ten site as far as everything. Not just football, but especially with football season now, it's going to be crazy over there. So that'll definitely be fun. This week ahead for me is going to be fun over there, reporting on anything that goes on. And this Ohio State-Indiana game, I know a decent amount about Indiana, but it's going to take, even for the head coach at Indiana, it's going to take him a few games to truly understand what Indiana has. But like Troy mentioned, I mean, this is where we're starting. It's an interesting game. It starts Thursday, or it takes place Thursday. I guess it shouldn't really go past Thursday, but it takes place Thursday, August 31st. By the time you're hearing this, maybe potentially this game has already been played. Hopefully not. But in general, Ohio State at Indiana on ESPN on Thursday. It's kind of the second day of college football for week one. I mean, we've had, I think it was 4 or 5 games in college football in total played on Saturday. That was what day was that? That was the 26th. But so this coming week is obviously the first full week of college football. Ohio State at Indiana. It's weird to get a Big Ten game happening week one. It's, Ohio State at Indiana. It's on ESPN. It's Thursday night college football. So I think that's why ESPN is willing to broadcast at Indiana. I know that the ESPN team is intrigued by going to Indiana, but to actually get into the game, I know Indiana's got a solid secondary. I know Indiana's got a solid defense returning from a year ago. I don't remember exactly how many starters they returned. I think it's 8 or 9. I remember 2 years ago that Indiana defense was atrocious, and then last year they brought in a new defensive coordinator. Now they were a lot better, much improved. I think they ranked in like the 40s defensively in 2016. So, and they return a lot of those guys. So Indiana shouldn't get killed in this game. It's going to be, I think the athletic director at Indiana said this is our biggest season opening game ever in Indiana football history, and I would agree. I mean, ESPN's going to be there. It's week 1. You're hosting number 2 ranked Ohio State. It can't get much bigger if you're Indiana for starting a season. So that place will be loud. The defense will be solid. I certainly expect Ohio State to win. I'm curious. I wanted to pull up, and I haven't yet, what the line was for Vegas for this game, but I expect Ohio State to score points. The really interesting thing for Ohio State last year was their offense and how inconsistent J.T. Barrett at quarterback was, especially from a throwing perspective and accuracy standpoint. He's kind of gone down in accuracy every year he's been at Ohio State. Now he's a senior. Now he's supposed to truly, truly be the leader, even though he has been the last couple of years regardless. But this year he's truly supposed to be the leader, and if Ohio State is actually going to be a legitimate national title contender, which all accounts are they're supposed to be, for me it's because of their defensive line. But as long as Barrett can lead the offense to be a respectable offense and a passing offense that you have to respect, you can't just throw 8 in the box and hope and probably positively hope that Barrett can't beat you over the top. Ohio State's offense, kind of when they play really good defenses like Clemson a year ago, Clemson shut them out in the semifinal game. So obviously Ohio State has had their issues throwing the football, and it'll be interesting to see Ohio State play a solid defense that probably not many people expect in Indiana, week 1 at Indiana at night. So it'll be an intriguing game. I expect Ohio State to win. And watching Ohio State's D-line, which should be one of the top units in the country, no matter what kind of unit you're looking at, whether it's running backs, receivers, secondary D-line, that Ohio State D-line has the potential to dominate any game against any opponent. That includes, your Clemson's, Alabama's, whoever. That's how dominant Ohio State's defensive line should be. So I expect Indiana's offense to struggle mightily. But seeing Ohio State, J.T. Barrett throw the ball against Indiana, that's the top thing I'm looking for, realistically.
Well, Kevin, there's always been concerns about Barrett. I mean, he's a pretty athletic guy, and he's shown flashes. I mean, he's went out there, and the thing that I look at Barrett, and I just think he's inconsistent right now, and it seems like if you can get to him early in the game, it kind of throws him off a little bit. And he's just that guy that's, maybe he's matured from last year to this year. He's just a guy, though, to me, Kevin, that has some potential. He's shown it, that he can really lead the team, but he's not really put together, to me, consistency over the course of game to game to game. And even within games, he'll have little stretches where he's not so good. But he's also shown times where he can be very good. And he can make throws, and he can do things with his legs. So they've got a very competent starter in him. But I'll tell you what, Indiana's a team, Kevin, that is probably the expectations for them in the Big Ten this year not very high. Because any casual fan, unless you're an Indiana Hoosiers fan, I don't think many people can name anybody off the Indiana roster that is supposed to make jaws drop. And again, nothing against the Indiana program. They're in that situation where they're trying to get the program to be successful. The problem you have at Indiana, Kevin, it's a basketball school. And I'll put it out there. I know football fans will probably disagree with me, but that's what Indiana is. It's a basketball school. I'm not saying Indiana doesn't care about football. No, they definitely do. but I can't remember the last time where Indiana scared the pants off me as an opponent to the Wisconsin Badgers, who I root for. They don't really scare me. Have they had good seasons? Yes. Do they have quality players? Yes. But they're not a team that's in the upper echelon of the Big Ten. It does surprise me, though, that it's an opening day game in the Big Ten. And the reason I say that, Kevin, Ohio State on paper should demolish Indiana, probably by like 21 points. However, it's opening day. It's at Indiana. It's at night. It's on national TV. First game for both of these squads. Those early games, you never know what to expect. You always hear me talk about cupcakes, and I don't like when teams schedule cupcakes. Well, sometimes those cupcakes win. They actually win because they have nothing to lose. And that's what intrigues me about this game. Indiana, Kevin, has nothing to lose. Their expectations not very high. They're not expected to win their division in the Big Ten. They're not expected to be Big Ten champions. They're not expected to be in the college football playoff. So what else do they have to play for? This to them is opening day. It's almost like the Super Bowl in week 1 to them. Can you imagine, Kevin, what they're using for motivation? And as a former coach and a former athlete, playing Ohio State on opening day, you shouldn't need any other motivation. You shouldn't need a coach in your ear saying, let's get up for this game. Those players are up for this game. If they can beat Ohio State in week 1, again, you're going into this season. And not like the coaches are saying, well, we're just going to lay down because we're not expected to do anything. A win over Ohio State could propel them to a much better season than what they were expected to do. That's where the intrigue comes in. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but those players from Indiana, Kevin, at home against Ohio State opening day, I think they're going to keep it close for a while. But I think in the second half, Ohio State will just pull away because talent-wise, they have more talent. And like you mentioned, that defensive line, that Indiana offense is going to struggle. This could be a game in the first half, honestly, Kevin, that you see maybe 10-7 at half, 10-3 at half, maybe even Ohio State throwing a shutout against Indiana. Maybe it's 7-0, 10-0, 14-0, but it's going to be close in that first half. And then I think in the second half, I think Ohio State just pulls away because talent-wise, they have a ton more talent than Indiana. So those are my quick thoughts on that game.
Yeah, and I'll keep it quick for this one too, just to respond to what you're saying. Ohio State's basically favored by 21 points, favored by 20.5 in some spots, 21 in others. You need to put down $2,000 on Ohio State to win 100. That's something I would not do at Indiana week 1, with this being Indiana's arguably biggest game ever, potentially, and easily the biggest season opener. It is a season opener, so you're getting a ton of energy in that stadium from their players, their crowd. There's no way I would bet a ton of money on Ohio State, even to win outright. It seems ludicrous considering how heavily favored there are and how much people think of Ohio State. I'm with you 100% that Ohio State's obviously the more talented team. There's a reason why they're ranked number 2 and Indiana's not ranked. But to call Ohio State 21-point favorites is hard to me because with just like you're saying, I could see Ohio State being up by a field goal at halftime. If it's 10-7, that wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. So I think this will be a game that people would say, this will be a closer game than what people are saying. Finally, I got that out right. Because Indiana's defense is underappreciated and JT Barrett in general is overappreciated, I think. So I think it'll be a closer game because of the setting, so to say. Even if it was in the middle of the season and Ohio State was clicking on all cylinders, then maybe I'd pick Ohio State to win by 21 points. But especially considering everything, I would put money on Indiana to cover that spread if I had to be a betting man. The other game happening on Thursday is the University of Buffalo playing at Minnesota, which Minnesota should win, realistically. I have no real comments on that one, Troy, unless we got special ties to the University of Buffalo, Kevin. I know we do.
You and I do.
Yep.
You know, and I'll let you share with the listeners why we have close ties to the University of Buffalo.
Yes, the head coach at Buffalo is Lance Leipold, which probably not many of you people listening to this show know or care who the head coach at the University of Buffalo is.
They don't really care, but
but we know
there is a connection there.
Yeah, well, Leipold's in his, I don't even know what year it is. It's his third year, fourth year, maybe potentially. I'd have to do
third year, Kevin.
Third year at Buffalo, and the reason Troy especially knows that, and I know Lance Leipold's name, is because I've talked to the guy more than a dozen times before, because he was the head coach at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, which is where both Troy and I graduated from, around 20 years apart from.
Many years apart. That's why I'm the old man.
Yes, that is true. But so I originally, actually, when I met Troy, it was to talk about UW-Whitewater football, and the head guy in charge at the time was Lance Leipold. So the majority of my information, other than my two eyes watching games and talking to players afterwards of those games, was talking to Lance Leipold and listening to press conferences and call-in calls for the week. So Lance Leipold was kind of my go-to guy for football because he was UW-Whitewater's head coach, and now he's at Buffalo. So I wish him all the luck in the world. If they were to beat Minnesota by 100 points, I'd actually be just fine with it personally. But this is a Big Ten show. I think Minnesota is the better team. So I would pick Minnesota to win at home against Buffalo. Again, unless there's anything else you have to say about that one, Troy, there are other Big Ten teams in action on Friday.
Well, I just want to comment about Coach Leipold. I had him on another show that I used to do called the Red Light Sports Ramble a couple of times. And, you know, this is a guy that I don't think, Kevin, people realize what he actually accomplished in Division III. This is a guy that was, you know, going out recruiting in Division III, not able to offer scholarships. And granted, you're not seeing a lot of UW-Whitewater players in the NFL, but you're talking about a dominating Division III program. This guy just year after year was bringing in great talent with no scholarships to offer. And granted, they weren't maybe all D1 recruits, but he would go out and pick guys to go into a system that worked well at UW-Whitewater and dominated the Division III forefront. I think he's going to do okay at Buffalo, and I hope that someday we see him coaching at a major university. I'm not saying that I love Coach because he was at UW-Whitewater. You got to take that away. You take away that I graduated from UW-Whitewater. Look at what he did. Kevin, you were there. You were a student there. And when I was there 20 years ago, they had a great football program too. Whitewater is a great Division III football school. It is a wonderful school for football. So if anybody from Wisconsin is a high school kid playing high school football, or even in the Midwest, anywhere across the country, if you're one of those players that is not a D1 level guy, but you want to play football and you're pretty good, try to get in touch with UW-Whitewater because they're always playing on a national stage, Kevin. That is a program that is very, very good. But my point here is Coach did some amazing things at UW-Whitewater that not a lot of other coaches are able to do, and that is to continuously play for a championship. He put his system in place, and Buffalo will reap those rewards as long as they stick to the commitment of Coach and let him do his thing. It's a different stage, but I think he can get it done at Buffalo. Not to win a national championship at Buffalo. That would be nearly impossible. But I think he can continuously get that program to a 9-4 mark, an 8-4 mark, somewhere around there, and get that team to a good bowl game. I think he's that good of a coach, and I think someday you will see him coaching at a major university. So I wanted to get your quick thoughts there on Coach and his possible future endeavors. Do you think he's good enough to coach at a major university down the road, Kevin?
I think he could be. I wouldn't say negative stuff about him whatsoever. I mean, obviously, like you said, while you were at UW-Whitewater, you had a good football program going at Whitewater, and he kind of took that over and did ridiculous things there. I remember that when I was a freshman, they went undefeated. When I was a sophomore, they went undefeated. When I was a junior, they went undefeated. They might have lost one game in there. I think they won 3 titles in 4 years. And I think they might have went undefeated my first 3 years there. And then my 4th year at Whitewater, I think they lost a couple games. That was like an atrocious year for them when they ended up going like 10-2. And then the year after that, they won the title again. But so it's basically been UW Whitewater and Mount Union ruling D3, at least for when Leipold was there. And I know this last year, Whitewater had somewhat of an early exit, and UW Oshkosh, I believe it was, either won the whole thing or finished second. I can't remember now. But when Leipold was coaching the Warhawks, I mean, they were ridiculously dominant, and it's obviously different to go from D3 to D1, and to playing, at Buffalo. It's not as though he's coaching, Portland State or Northwest Louisiana. It's the University of Buffalo, and you're competing in the MAC, so it's not crap. You're not going against garbage schools. So Buffalo gets, legitimate TV time against MAC opponents. You're not going to be on ESPN week after week, but it's the MAC. It's not a terrible conference. And, yeah, I mean, if you're a Wisconsin kid and you're looking for D1 schools, and just if you had any influence whatsoever to reach out to Leipold and Buffalo, it's a cold place like Wisconsin that Leipold just knows how to win in, and he knows how to recruit, and he knows the types of players that work in his system and that work in that kind of weather. And if you're looking for a place, you're a D1 athlete, and you may not be, getting calls from Virginia Tech and Alabama and Ohio State and Penn State. A place like Buffalo, you can certainly do much worse, especially for a coach like Lance Leipold, who, like I said, just knows not necessarily the Northeast, but the cold, and just knows how to win in the cold, in, quote unquote, the middle of nowhere, you call it, with, a small town. You can do much worse than going to Buffalo, I guess, is my point here as a high school athlete.
Yeah, you definitely can. And I wish, and here's the thing, I know this is a Big Ten show, but whenever Buffalo plays, I've actually been paying very close attention since coaches went there, because I want to see him turn that program around. I want to see him have success, because I talk to a lot of people, that are in the sport, but he's just very genuine, and he's a guy that I just want to see a lot of success to. I don't think he's going to go to Minnesota and win. Minnesota's got a solid club. I think this is a team, Kevin, that in Minnesota, that you may see a game where they have a major upset during the course of the season. This is a program that I don't think is going to compete for a division title in the Big Ten, but I think it's a team that is pretty solid, and I think somewhere along the lines, we're going to be talking on Monday or Tuesday about what Minnesota did over the weekend, and it's going to be a major upset. So mark that down. Somewhere during the course of this season, Minnesota's going to have one of those wow wins, and I don't think Buffalo's going to go to Minnesota and win, but I think they're going to give them a good game. Let's move on to the weekend games, Kevin. I'll let you roll out whatever game you want to talk about next.
Yeah, I'll just go in, I guess, order of in terms of when the games are being played. The next game for the Big Ten, you got number 8 Washington playing at Rutgers on Friday, September 1st, a day after Ohio State plays Indiana and Buffalo plays Minnesota. But so Rutgers is at home, which is a good thing. Rutgers could use as much of an advantage as they can possibly get, but unfortunately you're playing number 8 Washington, who is one of those teams. They're one of the, I believe it's 8 teams that I counted off last week. I'd have to recount this week because I haven't looked in depth at it again. But as far as teams that can actually win the national title this year, I think Washington is one of them, and they're one of, I believe it's 8 teams that I think can. There might be 9 if you include Louisville, if I remember correctly.
So what I'm hearing, Kevin, is you're not calling a Rutgers upset here.
No, I'm not. I could see, like you said, Minnesota. They're one of those teams that on any given Saturday could upset a team like Washington. I wouldn't pick it, but I could understand it. It wouldn't shock me if Minnesota were to beat Washington. It would shock me if Rutgers did. So that's what I have to say about that. The only other game on Friday, which you can add to the Rutgers-Washington matchup, but the other game on Friday is Wisconsin hosting Utah State.
Yeah, I don't think Rutgers is going to have. Again, it's opening day, so when you play a home game and you have all the excitement, the adrenaline, the game can be close. It's game one against live contact, against another opponent. There's a lot of emotions that go high. They might keep it close for a quarter. Washington's just too darn good. And then you move on to the Wisconsin game, Kevin. I'm not just being a Wisconsin homer, but this is a game that Wisconsin should just flex their muscles and be able to win this game. But again, I know Wisconsin comes in ranked number 9, and so everybody's going to say, well, Wisconsin's this great team. I don't think they're a great team, Kevin. I haven't seen them play. I know they have some quality players, and maybe I'm just being overly critical. But I look at the Wisconsin roster, and Chris is just going to get it done the old-fashioned way. He's going to play defense, and he's going to try to run the ball with an average quarterback. I mean, that's the way Wisconsin football has been since I've been 12 years old. They always dominated in the run game, and they try to put together a very good defense. The problem I have defensively, look at everything they lost to the NFL, Kevin. That linebacking core is a lot of new faces. And I'm not, until they play against another opponent, I'm not sold that this is going to be a great defense this year yet. They could prove me wrong. They haven't played a game. There's a lot of new people and a lot of new components on that defense, and especially at that line, you lose Watt. I mean, you lose a number 1 draft pick. You lose him, and that's a big loss. Now, I know they've got some returning starters on that defense, but there's a lot of new components in key positions, and until I see them play, I'm not 100% sold on this Wisconsin defense right now. This is a game, Kevin, that would not surprise me if all of a sudden Wisconsin hopes of making that playoff are dashed in week 1 all of a sudden from their first game, losing the first game, because offensively they're not an offensive powerhouse. So if defensively they don't have things together, all of a sudden they're going to see themselves down by 10 points. This is not a Wisconsin offense to me, Kevin, that's going to be able to come back from deficit. They've got to play with a lead. And again, I have so many question marks about this Wisconsin team that it would not surprise me if all of a sudden we're talking next week that, oh my, the number 9 team in the country lost. I'm not saying they're going to. I think they'll pull it out. But it would not surprise me if we're talking next week on this show and we're saying number 9 team in the country has lost.
I haven't done a lot of research on Utah State. I haven't done much, if any, research on Utah State. But I would be surprised just because I can look back at last year and see that Utah State went 3-9, and they could be greatly improved. I don't know. They could be much worse than 3-9. But they went 3-9 a year ago, and there's a reason, I think, why the opening line for this, and this was a while ago, but Wisconsin was favored by 37 in this week 1 matchup. So you have teams like Michigan State favored by 18, Nebraska by 19, Iowa by 11.5, Illinois by 11. And then you've got some bigger ones like Northwestern's favored, Penn State's favored big.
Kevin, I would not take that bet. I would take Utah State in the points. If anybody out there is listening as a betting person, there's no way Wisconsin beats that team by 37 points. No way. There's no way. They don't have the quarterback. Paul Chryst is going to grind it out. So maybe defensively they can score a few times, but if you're a betting person, take Utah State in the points. I don't see Wisconsin beating that team by 37 points, Kevin.
No, I hear you. And it's going to be difficult, too, because like you said, you just don't have the cornerback play. Hornibrook is a sophomore, and he's showed that he could be a capable guy a year ago as a freshman. So I think there is upside there. I like him going forward. I don't think he matches up to the level of, most of these other top 10 teams that Wisconsin is lumped in with. That's why Wisconsin's not one of the teams that I think could win it all, even though realistically they probably have a better shot than some of the teams talent-wise that I think could win it all. But just it's going to go back to this a lot this season when we talk about Wisconsin and just their schedule. And in 2015, for example, they led the country in scoring defense, and then you lost a few guys. In 2016, you had a harder schedule. You had teams like LSU on there. You just had a tougher schedule to play through. And so, they didn't lead the country in scoring defense. And then you lose guys, like you mentioned, Troy, TJ Watt, Jack Sitchie, the linebacker, out for the year before the year even starts this year as a linebacker. That sucks for Wisconsin. He's supposed to be he was good a year ago. He was supposed to be obviously really good this year. He's gone due to injury. So you've got, roughly half your defense back, supposedly on paper 6 starters back now that Sitchie's out for the year. This Wisconsin defense will be good, but again, it'll be based on the schedule. And so once the year plays out, you may have an 11-1 Wisconsin team who's got maybe statistically a pretty dang strong, good defense, but you just haven't played many teams. Again, your toughest game is at home against Michigan late in the year. So if you're undefeated and you're at home against a good Michigan team, you're going to get a really good Wisconsin team just based on, again, the setting of it, your record, what you're playing for. Obviously at Camp Randall, that's going to be hectic. So Wisconsin's going to have a light schedule this year. And I'm with you in terms of talent and offensively. I don't expect Wisconsin to put up 50 against, many teams, if anyone, this year. But it'll be interesting to see what Hornibrook does in his second year. It'll be interesting to see what this offensive line and running game does, because it seems like year after year you constantly have a good back, at least one, and a potential first-round NFL draft pick among the offensive line. But, yeah, I think defense is what it's going to come down to if you end up looking at beating a Michigan later in the year, if you're looking at beating Nebraska on the road. Those are going to be tougher games for Wisconsin, and it starts with this Utah State game. I just wanted to mention that line of 37 to open it up, because that is a big line for somewhat average offense.
That's just ridiculous, Kevin.
Yeah.
I don't know what these people think. Do they know anything about Wisconsin football? Even when they had Russell Wilson scoring 37 points was tough. I mean, come on now. I don't care how bad Utah State was. You got to look at the makeup of this Wisconsin team. They're going to try to run the ball 60 times. They're going to try to run the ball 60 times. I guarantee it. And so they might put up 28 points because they'll run it, and they should be able to run it against Utah State. But, this is where I'm going with this, Kevin. It wouldn't surprise me. What happens if they fumble and Utah State returns one for a touchdown? And then they go, a drive where they move the sticks but have to punt, and Utah State, a missed tackle, and it's 14-0. This offense is not built to come back from a deficit. That's why I'm saying this team, Kevin, on paper, ranked number 9, great for Wisconsin. But when I look at the schedule, yeah, they could go 11-1, 12-1. But what happens when Michigan jumps out the 21-point lead? They're not coming back from that. And what happens if one of these teams that is of lesser talent jumps out because they do fumble and they give up points on the offensive side of the ball? I don't see this team being able to come back from deficit, and it scares me that we've talked about such an easy schedule. But the more I look at it, there's this uncomfortable feeling inside me that there's going to be a game or 2 or 3 where that happens, and we're talking about a Wisconsin loss on Monday, Kevin. That's all I have about Wisconsin. I could go on and on. Yes, I'm a Badger fan, but as you notice, I'm not jumping on this bandwagon.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And, for example, they play Florida Atlantic week 2, and Lane Kiffin leading Florida Atlantic this year. But Florida Atlantic's not going to be atrocious because of some of the recruits and transfers that he's actually brought in there year one. And then at BYU week 3, like I said before, at Nebraska, a game at Indiana, who's got a solid defense, a game at Minnesota to end the year. You still play Michigan. So Michigan's still a good team. So there are definitely losable games on here, especially like we've been saying, that Wisconsin does not have an overpowering offense. And maybe their offensive line just becomes dominant and their running game is just too difficult for any decent team to stop. You've got to have a really good defense to stop Wisconsin's rushing attack. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that's something Troy and I are missing out on. I think Wisconsin could go undefeated this year, but I'm kind of like you, Troy. I'm very leery of it because, yeah, Wisconsin's favored in every game, but they are not as dominant a team as these other top 10 teams, even toward the back end. Penn State's number 6, Oklahoma 7, Washington 8, Oklahoma State's 10. Those are the teams surrounding Wisconsin, and those teams could put up 50 against anybody. That's just the way it works. And in college football, you can have an Alabama defense, but if you have Deshaun Watson, we've seen it 2 years straight. Okay, so now I got to jump
in here because of what you're saying. And this is what I'm saying. When Wisconsin plays a team like that down the road, which would be, of course, a Michigan or in the Big Ten championship or in a bowl game, and let's say for some reason they beat Michigan, they win the Big Ten title, man, that's going to put them in the playoff. And here's the thing, Kevin, I think they'd get embarrassed because they can't go point for point with teams like that. There's no way they could go point for point with Penn State. Now, Michigan, with their defense, okay, maybe they could hang in that game and they could win that game. But you're talking about those high-powered offenses, they're going to score points. I don't care how good your defense is. And now you're going to put the burden on a Wisconsin offense that is going to try to grind it out to match a team point for point. And I just don't see it happening.
Yep, I would agree 100%. It's kind of like Ohio State was a year ago where you've got a really strong defense, number 1 first-round draft picks all over the place, and I'm not saying Wisconsin has that this year, but Ohio State had a really good defense a year ago. Barrett was just inconsistent, and not to say that Hornibrook will be inconsistent. I just think Barrett has more talent at this stage of his career than Hornibrook does. But you've got Ohio State had issues at times offensively a year ago, and it showed when they played Clemson, when you get shut out and you lose by 28, 31 points, whatever it ended up being. So I think the same thing could happen to Wisconsin if they played a Penn State, Alabama, USC, Florida State, Ohio State this year. I just don't think they're in the same class, even though they're ranked number 9 in the country, and that number 9 ranking may go up and up and up and up and up as the year goes on, as long as they keep winning. But it's just, you've got to show yourself, if you're Wisconsin, that you're by far better than these average teams, like certain teams like Ohio State, Florida State, Penn State, USC. Like those teams can beat other teams by 40 and 50. It's just not the way Wisconsin is, and in college football nowadays, it's just difficult to hold any really good offense to even in the 20s. I mean, if you're an Alabama defense a year ago and you think you can hold Deshaun Watson in the 20s, good luck, because he'll score 40 on you and win a national title, and that's what he did. So you can have all this NFL talent around you, but if you've got a high-powered college football offense, it's just tough to stop in today's game of college football.
Well, and like I'm saying, Kevin, Paul Chryst is going to grind it out, try to frustrate you by winning ball control and winning the time of possession battle, and then playing good defense, and hopefully you can get a 3-and-out and get the ball back right away and just keep the other team's offense off the field. I'm not saying that their offense is putrid, because they have an offensive line that is very good. They're going to have a running game that is very good, but they're just not a high-powered octane offense. And Paul Chryst is going to try to win the time of possession battle and frustrate the other offense. And you know, Kevin, from following football all these years that you have, that offenses need time to get in rhythm. And if that Wisconsin offensive running game gets in rhythm, they can dominate teams. They literally can dominate because they'll run the ball down your throat, and you know that you'll dominate. You will dominate other teams, and they get tired. And then you can have your will with them in the second half. That's what Wisconsin hopes to do. They're just not high octane.
No, No question about it. And unfortunately, I ended up having to drop my call there for a few seconds, so I missed a portion of what you said, but just the last sentence that you said, that they're not high octane. And yeah, that's what we're talking about when we talk about Wisconsin. We've got through 4 of these Big Ten games, and a certain amount of them going forward, I should say, we can just kind of breeze by here. But there are a few interesting ones going on Saturday, September 2nd. That's obviously the first huge college football day. That's, truly week 1 where, you're going to get at least 100 different teams playing. So Saturday, September 2nd. And before I mention that, I should say Janarian Grant and Rutgers. If you watch a Rutgers game, look for Janarian Grant. You're not going to have to really search far and wide for him. He's a playmaker that would be a playmaker on Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State, Alabama. He'd be a playmaker anywhere. He's Rutgers' easily best player. He's up for numerous award watch lists. He's a kick returner, punt returner, running back, wide receiver, whatever you want to call him. He's a legitimate difference maker. If Rutgers were to actually beat a team like Washington, it would be because Janarian Grant would score like literally 4 or 5 touchdowns, because he's scored 2 or 3 against teams like Ohio State in the past. So when he got hurt a year ago, that's when Rutgers truly took a nosedive. Not that they wouldn't have with Grant healthy, but Janarian Grant at Rutgers is the only name you probably need to know as a casual fan if you see Rutgers on the television. But going into Saturday, Akron at Penn State. Penn State's favored. I've got it up here. Penn State's favored by 39. This was as of like a month ago. But Penn State's favored huge against Akron. Do you have anything on that, Troy? I don't. I expect Penn State to just blow by Akron.
The good old Akron Zips. You know what they did to Michigan a few years ago?
I do. I do.
So you never want to count out Akron. However, Penn State's too good offensively. Penn State could have one of the best offenses in the country, Kevin. They're that good. They got good quarterback play. They got a good offensive line. They got good skill position players. I can't see Akron doing what they did to Michigan a few years ago. This is a Penn State team that should be able to score at will. Now, this is a line that makes more sense to me, because Penn State put up that many points. But not that Wisconsin line. But the Penn State line, that would be one that I would stay away from the line, because it's a lot of points, but they're very capable of putting up that many points against Akron.
Yeah, no question about it. We're in agreement. Penn State wins by at least 30 in that game. Next, just on the chronological list, is Maryland at Texas. Texas is ranked 23rd in the country. Texas has been struggling the last few years. You obviously get a new coach in Tom Herman. So Texas is going to be given credit for that head coaching acquisition that should make their offense automatically better, kind of like bringing Jim Harbaugh into your program just gets better. Whether you see it statistically here, statistically there, Jim Harbaugh teams just get better with Jim Harbaugh than whatever coach you had the year before. Tom Herman's offense will be at least good at Texas, because that's just what Tom Herman does. That's what he did at Ohio State before he moved on to Houston, and now he's at Texas. But so Texas has a good offense. It just will. And Maryland on the road at Texas, I expect Texas to win. But I was curious to, again, see the betting lines on these. And Texas was a 23-point favorite when the line first came out. That kind of surprised me, because I don't think Texas is that great of a team. I don't think Maryland is good, but I think Maryland is average. And I think Texas is above average, but I don't think they're 23 points better than Maryland. It's one of those games where it wouldn't shock me to see Maryland win. I'm just not expecting it.
I don't think Maryland wins in Texas, Kevin. If this game was at Maryland, I would say here is your upset Big Ten game of the week. Because like you said, Maryland, again, it's like the Indiana team. Maryland is a basketball school, but they've got some decent football players there. They've got guys that are going to go and play hard, but they have to travel to Texas. With you, the line, ridiculous line. Now, again, a new regime in Texas. Maybe these guys that make the lines know more than I do. But I don't think they're 23 points better than Maryland. And if Texas isn't careful and they're overlooking this Maryland squad, Maryland could sneak up on them. I'm not going to go as bold, like I said, about Minnesota making one of those major wow upsets. I think Maryland is Maryland. It is what you get. You're going to get a team that is an average to below average team in the Big Ten, play against other average teams, and that's where they're going to get their wins. When they play against the upper echelon teams, probably not going to pull off any major upsets. Not putting Texas in an upper echelon scope anywhere near that. I think they got a ranking because I think they got a new coaching staff. Had the old coaching staff been there, I don't think they're even in the top 25. Texas is not that good this year. It's going to take a couple years for them to get back to where they were. They're going to have to go out and prove themselves. But I don't think Maryland goes to Texas, Kevin, and beats Texas down there. If the game was in Maryland, I'd be calling an upset.
Yeah, a very fair statement. I'm not in disagreement with that whatsoever. The next game is Ball State at Illinois, and that's not going to be a sexy game for the Big Ten. But Ball State...
You're not DVRing that game, Kevin?
Unfortunately, no. I'm not.
You're not changing your whole schedule for the day to watch Illinois against Ball State?
I can't say that I am.
I will tell you this.
Okay.
From my years of just following college football, Ball State against Illinois, you're like, oh, my God, who the heck is Ball State? Ball State actually plays against Division I opponents early in the season. They do play tough, and they've kept games close. But, again, what happens with these teams like a Ball State is early in the season, these are their Super Bowl games. I know it's only Illinois. But for Ball State against Illinois, that's like a Super Bowl, a playoff game to them. They're going to be up for that game. This could be one of those where you see maybe Illinois fall to Ball State, Kevin, because Ball State is a team that nobody has heard of. They're going to go out. They want to prove themselves. I'm not saying they're going to. I think Illinois will pull it off just because of the nature of skill. But, again, games aren't won on paper. But from the previous years, when you hear Ball State, and Ball State plays a lot of Big Ten teams early in the season, don't get a lot of wins, but they play these teams a lot closer than I think that Big Ten opponent thought they would. And that's what you're going to get from Ball State. They're going to come out and they're going to play 60 minutes. And, again, if Illinois is not careful, all of a sudden you're talking about Ball State and an upset over Illinois. I'm not calling it. I'm just saying it's one of those games that watch out for a Ball State. They're a team that's going to come out and play very, very aggressive, and they're going to try to play Illinois tough. Just, I think, over the course of 60 minutes, Illinois' skill is going to take over, kind of like what's going to happen to Ohio State, Indiana. Second half, Illinois' talent should be better than Ball State, and that's when they pull away.
Yeah, great points. Great points overall. 2 years ago, I had to look this up, obviously, but 2 years ago, Ball State was 3-9 overall. They went in the fourth week of the season at Northwestern 2 years ago and lost by 5 points. That's a 3-9 Ball State team. Last year, and I also didn't know this, Troy, but Ball State's in the MAC. I don't know when that happened, but Ball State competes in the MAC now. Maybe I've just been off my rocker and haven't noticed that Ball State has been in the MAC. Obviously, it's been a few years. But anyway,
well,
2 years ago.
Kevin, follow the Big Ten, write for a Big Ten website, or follow the MAC every day. And I'm not taking anything away from the MAC. I'm really not. But I grew up in Wisconsin. I'm a Big Ten guy. I don't follow the MAC that closely either. And I'm just saying, you compare conference, which is the Big Ten, which is probably the best conference in college football this year, to the MAC, which is not anywhere near the Big Ten. I'm not going to blame you for not knowing all the ins and outs of the MAC conference, Kevin.
Here's what I'll say. I think the MAC is one of the better group of five schools. You've got your Power Five, which obviously everyone and their mother knows all the Power Five schools and conferences and whatnot with the Big Ten and SEC and Pac-12 and so on. But so you have those next group of five, and you've got these weird small conferences that you don't know year in, year out which of these conferences are picking up small schools. But so the MAC is, to me, one of the better if not the best, group of 5 conferences. So I was just surprised that I hadn't realized Ball State was in the MAC. But regardless, like I said, 2 years ago they went to Northwestern, lost by 5 points. Last year, Ball State went to Indiana week 2, lost by 10 points. Those are not good teams in Northwestern Indiana, but they're not complete pushovers. And so those were close games. Now this year, week 1 at Illinois, the game's on BTN. It's not going to be found nowhere, which some Ball State games are, hey, to be announced. Who knows when this game will be on TV, if it will be. But so this game is going to be on TV. Ball State will know it. It's, again, like Troy said, you play Big Ten opponents on a yearly basis. Illinois is favored by 11 points. That could, like you said, it wouldn't shock me to see Illinois go down to a team that commonly plays Big Ten teams and, again, competes in the MAC, which has teams like Western Michigan who can go 12-1, 13-0, has teams like Northern Illinois that can go 12-1, 13-0, make a January bowl game. So Ball State's not going to be incredibly outclassed by teams like Northwestern 2 years ago, Indiana last year, Illinois this year. This Illinois game is probably going to be their easiest Big Ten game in a while. So to see Illinois go down, I wouldn't blink an eye at that. I would favor Illinois, like Troy said, but it's a Big Ten upset.
I might take Ball State in the points in this one, Kevin.
Yeah.
I might take Ball State in the points. What did you say the line was, 11.5?
It's 11, yeah.
11. So, honestly, and I don't bet. I throw that out there. I'm not going to put any money down on any of these games. I'm not a betting guy that way. I play DraftKings. I would take, if I was in a pool, and in a point pool, which I sometimes will partake in for fun, I would take Ball State in the points in this one, Kevin.
Yeah. Yep. I'd agree with you. I'd agree with you 100%. To move on, we've got 6 more games to move through. This next one is very interesting to me because Iowa is featured, and Iowa's at home to Wyoming. And Wyoming has the much better quarterback in this game. Wyoming has arguably the best quarterback in college football this year, and that's not to say in whatever conference Wyoming's in. Unfortunately, I don't remember. I don't know if it's the Big West Conference or what the deal is with Wyoming, but the name's Mountain West Conference. That's what it's called. Wyoming, at least last I checked, they were in the Mountain West Conference. But so Wyoming, not talking about the Mountain West Conference, not talking about the Big Ten, not talking about any particular conference, Wyoming in Josh Allen has arguably the best quarterback in college football. And like I mentioned on last week's show, I beat on Iowa and their scheduling. And Troy always talks about cupcakes, and Iowa always schedules cupcakes. And I guarantee you when Iowa scheduled Wyoming, whenever it was, 7 years, 10 years, 70 years ago, Iowa was not anticipating Wyoming on having arguably the number 1 pick in the 2018
Yeah, they probably scheduled this
draft.
game when I was like 5. It was probably that long ago. I got to stop being so sarcastic with these cupcake games. I'll let you finish your point because this is no cupcake for Iowa.
No, and that's exactly my point here is Iowa, and I've got to find the line on this one. This is the one I couldn't. Oh, there it is. Iowa's favored by 11.5, and I'll say it right now. I would take Wyoming in the points. I would be very tempted to take Wyoming winning the whole game because it's the first game of the year, and Iowa can say, hey, it's Wyoming. And their coaching staff can respond with, yeah, it's Wyoming, but they've got a really good quarterback. So you look at, Mel Kiper and Todd McShay and any NFL draft guru you want to look at, and Josh Allen is one of the top 3 picks projected in the 2018 NFL draft. He's there with USC's Sam Darnold. He's there with Josh Rosen.
He very well could be the franchise quarterback of the Cleveland Browns.
He very well could be. And I'd be very happy with that if you're a Cleveland Browns fan because I've seen Sam Darnold play, and he's very impressive, and he's Andrew Luck-like, but this Josh Allen kid plays like kind of a Dante Culpepper, kind of a quicker Big Ben. He's 6'5", and he can run. He's not a runner. He's easily a thrower from the pocket, but he can get out of the pocket and throw it, and he's got a huge arm. This kid, I tweeted some of his highlight film from like a week ago. If you go at Kid Cunny, that's my Twitter, if you go like down a week of tweets, which is not a lot for me, I retweeted like a Josh Allen highlight reel that's like 3, 4, 5 minutes long. And it's just it's incredible because this kid seriously looks like at least the next Big Ben, the next Dante Culpepper. He's just a big kid that can move, and he's got a rocket arm. So I would love to see Iowa, who schedules cupcakes. And again, this is, I write about Big Ten football. I write about Big Ten sports. I like the Big Ten in general. But to see Iowa schedule a cupcake, quote unquote, like this, and to be favored by 11 points, and you're at home, I would love to see this number one potential quarterback just completely mow over him, score 38 points, and Iowa be like, oops, well, so much for that one. I guess we're 0-1 now, even though we scheduled this quote-unquote cupcake. So Josh Allen's the real deal, and he's going to give Iowa a run for their money. I would absolutely take Wyoming plus 11 points, even at Iowa week 1.
Yeah, Kevin. I mean, this is a Wyoming team that's going to be able to put up points against an Iowa team. They're going to have a solid defense this year at Iowa, but there's no other quarterback in the Big Ten that you can compare Allen to. There's just not. So you can watch all the film you want, and you can try to do scout team reps. But what are you doing? Are you taking your tight end and then having like the backup quarterback behind that tight end throwing the ball? Because that's what you're getting. You're getting a mammoth of a man that's going to stand in that pocket and going to probably carve your defense up. And I don't know offensively if Iowa can match that. I wouldn't be surprised, Kevin, if Iowa puts up at least 30. And again, does Iowa have enough offensively against a porous Wyoming defense to match them point for point? I don't know if they do. This is another game where if I'm betting the line, I'm betting against the Big Ten. Even though we've said this is the best conference in America, I'm betting against the line on this one and taking Wyoming in the points.
Yeah, and one of the reasons we say the Big Ten's the best conference is because you've got 4 really strong teams at the top, and Ohio State, Penn State can beat anyone. I think Michigan, Wisconsin can beat anyone too. It's just more difficult for them to. Then you start getting into teams like Nebraska, Northwestern, and it's like really difficult to see them beat an Alabama, USC, Ohio State. You obviously can, but it's just much more difficult to. Iowa is one of those teams that to me is just going to be solid this year. You lose your quarterback, that's not going to help you. You lose a good tight end. You lose good pieces here and there at Iowa. And again, you're playing. I am in love with Josh Allen. I'll say it right now. Nobody ever talks about him because you always talk about.
He's
Sam
your
Darnold.
Man crush, huh?
He is my man crush.
You're a newly engaged guy, Kevin. You can't be throwing man crushes up for the future Mrs. Youngster. She's going to get all mad before you even get married.
I know. But I seriously, I am going to watch parts of Wyoming, Iowa. Absolutely. I won't watch parts of Ball State, Illinois. I'll tell you that right now. But I will watch parts of Iowa, Wyoming. You bet you. It's at noon Eastern time, Saturday, September 2nd. If you haven't seen Josh Allen play, just watch him play for one series. I don't care what it is, but you're going to come away like, okay, yeah, this kid Cunny is not the youngster, is not kidding when he says this guy is projected to be a top 3, top 5, possibly top pick in the 2018 NFL draft, that teams are going to trade multiple picks to try and get up to get to a guy like Josh Allen at Wyoming. To me, and I'll say it now and then I'll just leave it at that, I think he is a more talented passing version of Cam Newton, and he's not going to have the rushing stats and style of Cam Newton in terms of running the ball like he did at Auburn, but he is as good a runner as Cam Newton. He is as big, maybe an inch smaller, 10 pounds lighter, but he's basically Cam Newton that's more accurate. That's my comparison. I think he's
Kevin, he's not going to have the rushing numbers that Cam Newton has because he thinks pass first. He thinks about passing the ball first. He's not Cam Newton who thinks about running first. Allen wants to pass the ball. And here's the thing. He's going to put up gaudy numbers this year, and he's good. But Wyoming's defense, he's going to have to put up points. You're going to see I wouldn't doubt, if you remember that name, Josh Allen, and you look at stats every Saturday night or every Sunday morning, I wouldn't be surprised if you see 6, 7, 400-yard passing games from this guy, Kevin.
No question about it. And I hope, seriously, and again, this is a Big Ten show. I write about the Big Ten. I hope that one of those 400-yard games comes against Iowa, because I just don't like that Iowa schedules cupcakes, and they got caught in scheduling a cupcake because this kid just became a monster at Wyoming. It's just random, but it happened. I think he's going to be a franchise quarterback in the NFL. I'll say that much. So I'm done with that man crush. Some of these other games can obviously move quicker through, but Bowling Green at Michigan State, if you're done with Wyoming, Iowa, Troy, I expect Michigan State to have a little bit of a bounce-back year. I don't expect it to be a, hey, Mark D'Antonio's back, 9-3, 10-2 Michigan State team, but I think they'll at least be average as opposed to 3-9 like a year ago. I don't think Bowling Green is going to be that team to say, yep, you're still down in the dumps. You're not coming back from anything a year ago. I don't think Bowling Green's that good, but I expect Michigan State to win. Trying to quickly see the line. Yeah, Michigan State's favored by 18. So maybe Michigan State doesn't win by 18, but they're at home. I think Michigan State bounces back a little bit from a 3-9 year a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this. The only thing with this game, again, you go to the proximity of the schools. This was probably, I'm not saying that this was necessarily even a cupcake scheduled game, because being a prior college coach, some of your early season games are based on proximity and travel, so you have a budget to work with. So this could be one of those proximity games. I know Bowling Green probably doesn't have the massive amounts of money, so picking up a game against Michigan State, that's close proximity for them. That could be the only thing that keeps this game close is, you're going to get a game where you got a school that's close proximity to Michigan State, but Michigan State should win this game, Kevin. And like you said, we talked about D'Antonio a few weeks ago, and the unfair, I think, criticism that he gets. Now, this guy's going to go and he's going to bring in players that can go to Michigan State. No, he's not going to bring in 10 top five-star recruits. He's going to bring in recruits that fit in Michigan State, and you got to give him time to do that. So he's got good players. I think they take care of Bowling Green.
Yeah, I'd agree. Mark D'Antonio, typically his best recruiting classes are somewhere ranked in the 30s, and then they just stay 4 years, and he's a good coach, and he hires good assistant coaches, which is a big part of college football that doesn't get talked about. But I think D'Antonio coaches up kids as well as just about anyone. I think you can take 10 5-star kids, and you're going to get 5 really good players out of them, no matter if I'm the coach or if Nick Saban's the coach or Urban Meyer's the coach. That's just the way of 5-star, high-end, ridiculously talented players. But you're getting 3-star, 4-star guys that turn into first-round picks, top 10 picks. Michigan State has that almost, it seems like every other year. They have a defensive back or a really strong running back like a Le'Veon Bell, or just there's always someone at Michigan State that's like, this one kid is super talented. He may have been a 3-star, but God, he got coached well, and he is going to be a top 10, top 15 pick. That's just what D'Antonio does. I don't think, and part of it's schedule too. You play Notre Dame, you play at Michigan, at Minnesota, at Northwestern, at Ohio State. It's just, again, it's a tough schedule, unfortunately. So you may even see Michigan State at like 4-8, 5-7, but that could be a vast improvement just because of the schedule. Again, not every schedule is the same. I'm not going to get into schedules right now, but Michigan State, I think, bounces back talent-wise. But you may even at the end of the season be like, wow, they went 5-7. That kind of sucks. But you look at the schedule, and it somewhat makes sense for what's probably an average Michigan State team as opposed to what was kind of a bad one a year ago. I'm going to save the big game on Saturday in terms of the Big Ten. I'm going to save that for last, Troy. But this next one, Nevada at Northwestern, I haven't read up anything on Nevada, but I know that Northwestern has a really good school record already holding running back in terms of rush yards. So Northwestern at home, you've got a good running game. I know they're returning a good defense from a year ago. Northwestern to me, could be probably the biggest test for Wisconsin in the West for the Big Ten West Championship title, I guess, or representative, I should say, because I think Nebraska and Northwestern probably tied, but you throw out Nebraska's Nate Jerry, the safety, their best defensive player, out for the year with an injury. I think that hurts. Anytime you lose your best defensive player, that's going to hurt. So I think Northwestern's probably the biggest test for Wisconsin in the West. I think Northwestern, again, I haven't looked at Nevada for 1 second, unfortunately, but I expect Northwestern to win because I think they're an above-average team. They received votes to get in the top 25. They just missed it. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see them end up a top 25 team by the end of the year.
Kevin, Northwestern is, I don't want to say they're the same as Wisconsin, but if you look at what you just talked about, Northwestern and Wisconsin, I'm not even going to say are mirror images, they're parallel to each other in the fact that Northwestern is going to play really good defense and hope they have enough offensively to control the clock and score more points than you. I think Northwestern is a team that a lot of people are overlooking. You mentioned it. They got some votes for the top 25, and it's because of their defense. And so if that defense is playing well and they're playing against teams that are at equal level, maybe even slightly above them, those are games Northwestern could win. It would not surprise me to see Northwestern win 8, 9, possibly even 10 games, Kevin. So I haven't looked at their schedule. I haven't dissected the schedule. But we all know that defense, when you have a really good defense, you can be in any game. And it's just a matter of what are they going to do offensively. But I think Northwestern's the same as Wisconsin. They've got to get out to a lead, and they've got to play in front. And then when they can play in front, you can do more things defensively. For those listening in, you're probably football fans, and you know this. When your team's ahead, defensively you can take some more risks. You can blitz some more. You can play a little bit man-to-man. You don't have to be vanilla defensively. You can be really aggressive, and that's what Northwestern does, Kevin. They try to get the lead and let that defense be very aggressive. But this is a team that if you blink, as we go through this Big Ten show, we could see Northwestern climb into the top 25 and be in that 8-9 win category at the end of the year because of that defense.
I'll say this. Northwestern plays Nevada to start, and then they go to Duke, and then they play Bowling Green. Those are their first 3 games, and then week 4 they have a bye, and then week 5 is at Wisconsin. I think they'll be 3-0. I think they'll be a top 25 team. I think their defense will show that we're a top 25 defense. Their running game with Justin Jackson, I forgot the name, but Justin Jackson's the name of the running back. They're going to be able to run the ball extremely well this year. They're going to be able to play defense extremely well this year. They're going to be 3-0. They're coming off a bye, going to Wisconsin week 5. That's going to be a difficult game for Wisconsin. Wisconsin's got Northwestern at home. You've got Michigan at home. Those are easily your 2 toughest home games, and then at Nebraska thrown in there. But Northwestern coming off a bye, being probably a top 25 team in my opinion, at least talent-wise. I don't care if the AP ranks them as such or not. I think they are a top 25 team coming off a bye at Wisconsin week 5. That's going to be a tough game. And nobody may be talking about Northwestern right now, but when you return your quarterback, the school's leading rusher at running back, 16 starters in general, you have a good defense. You have a week to prepare. I just looked through their schedule. At Wisconsin is going to be tough. I would favor Wisconsin. But at Nebraska is going to be tough. But I could see Northwestern winning that. The only other one that I wouldn't favor Northwestern is they're at home against Penn State the week after Wisconsin. That's going to be tough. But those other 9 games that they play, if I had to pick right now, I'd pick Northwestern to lose at Wisconsin, at Nebraska, and at home to Penn State. But I'd pick them to go 9-3. That's my assessment on Northwestern. I think they're just about as good as Wisconsin, maybe not as talented defensively, but Wisconsin lost some good pieces. Northwestern's a lot closer, I think, to Wisconsin than anyone else probably thinks.
Hey, Kevin, that Northwestern-Wisconsin game could be a shootout. It could be like 7-3.
Yeah.
It could be a true shootout. Like, literally, you got two offenses that are going to try to just jam the ball down your throat by running the ball. And so you know what'll happen here. You'll get these long drives, missed field goals, missed opportunities in the red zone by both teams. And, you know, you'll blink, and at the end of the third quarter, it'll be 3-0. And, yeah, I joke about it, but that realistically, you look at those two teams, as I said, they're parallel. And that Week 5 matchup, if you're going to be a betting person, definitely take the under. And I don't know what the over-under will be right now. They probably don't have it out for that game. But it can't be very hot. And if it is, if that's a number, Kevin, that's somewhere in the 50s, you better be taking the under. Because that is a game that's not going to see a lot of touchdowns. Literally, both these teams are going to try to control the clock and play great defense. And so now that I've said this, that Week 5 Wisconsin-Northwestern game will be like 62-56.
Yeah, right. I'll say this. I mean, if I had to randomly pick a score right now, I'd say Wisconsin beats Northwestern 20-17 probably. I'd be surprised if it got to 40 points. It wouldn't shock me. But, yeah, if that game's over-under in the 50s, that's ludicrous. And I would take Northwestern on the points right now. I don't care what the line's not set for it yet, but Northwestern at Wisconsin, Week 5, Northwestern's not ranked right now. If you can find a place to bet it and you see Northwestern taking double-digit points at Wisconsin, I don't care if it's at Wisconsin. Northwestern's going to play them tough. They're going to play everyone tough because you have a good running game, a good defense. Like we said, in college football, you've got these powerhouse offenses that are just impossible to completely contain. But Northwestern can score. They're not a prolific offense, but you can score with that good of a running back and that good of a defense. You're going to get that many more possessions, that much better field position. I like this Northwestern team a lot. They're probably one of my favorite teams in the Big Ten. Obviously, you have teams that are more talented, but Northwestern's a fun team to look for as the season goes on. I've got nothing more on this game. There's two more before the big one I wanted to mention. But 3 games left. Louisville is at home Louisville plays Purdue. And Purdue, this game's taking place in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium, so it's not a true home game for Purdue. So Louisville's number 16 in the country. Purdue likes to throw the football. Purdue is way out of its class in terms of trying to defend Lamar Jackson and Louisville, who can obviously put up ridiculous numbers and win the Heisman this year easily. I don't think that's a ludicrous statement. He's not the favorite, but he's one of like the top 3 or 5 favorites. Lamar Jackson at Louisville is ridiculously tough to stop. I don't expect Purdue to stop him. I know Purdue's not favored to win it. They are, they're 27-point underdogs to Louisville, and that's probably too little because Louisville can put up 50, 60 points in a hurry. If you paid attention to Louisville and Lamar Jackson last year, that's not changing coming into this year. And playing Purdue, I expect Louisville to, on a surface like that, Lucas Oil Stadium, they're going to score 50-plus on Purdue.
Woo, Kevin, throwing out numbers, 50 points against Purdue. Yeah, well, Purdue's defense isn't very good, and their offense isn't very good either. So Purdue, I don't expect to do too much damage in the Big Ten this year. Yeah, there'll be a team when they play those, again, equal to lesser talent teams around them. Could they pull out a couple wins? Sure, but I don't think you're going to see a Purdue team that is going to be bowl. Well, I shouldn't say that. Everybody's eligible for a bowl in today's NCAA, so I shouldn't say that. But Purdue, and again, I don't want to say a team is bad. I don't like saying that. Just
no.
Purdue doesn't match up talent-wise against a lot of teams in the Big Ten, let alone Louisville. And again, we just talked about it with Allen against Iowa. I mean, you haven't seen a quarterback of this caliber in the Big Ten. And so it's hard to plan, especially week 1. You can go by film from last year, but the kid's gotten better. At least you hope he has. I mean, he's a guy that can toss the ball around. Louisville can score. I can't imagine they're going to do a lot of, changing the wheel offensively. but Louisville is just too high-powered for Purdue, Kevin.
Yeah, Louisville gets thrown in there to me with those other 8 teams that can truly win the title this year because of Lamar Jackson and their offense. They can score with anyone, and I would pick their offense.
So who's the cupcake scheduler here, Kevin? Was it Purdue trying to schedule Louisville as the cupcake, or Louisville trying to schedule Purdue as the cupcake?
I give credit to both teams, to be honest, because I think even if you're Louisville, you're getting a Big Ten team, and you can possibly be getting, Purdue returns this quarterback from a year ago, David Bluff, and I think Purdue can throw the ball. I think they have chances to score against whoever, but they're just not super talented.
But you have to remember, Kevin, this game was probably scheduled 5, 6, 7 years ago.
No, I know.
And so that's what I'm saying. Was it Louisville going, we're a program on the rise that's consistently winning, 8, 9, 10 games, and so we're going to try to get a Big Ten game for strength of schedule, and so let's go bottom feed and we'll take Purdue? Or was it Purdue going, well, we need to get an early season win, so maybe we'll schedule Louisville? That's my thought. Because we're looking, 5, 6, 7 years ago when this game got set up, and I'm just thinking, I just threw it out there just for a quick conversation, not like we're not rambling on about the first weekend in the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought it up because Purdue could have said, yeah, it's Louisville, but it's Louisville. They're not going to be that good. So you could say, hey, we're getting this Louisville team who's probably going to be solid, but they shouldn't be that good. So we, as a Big Ten team, we think we should be able to get a quality win over a Louisville team who's been solid, not amazing. We think we can get them in Lucas Oil Stadium and win a game, a good game. And it's a good team to build our confidence and everything into going into Big Ten season. So Purdue could have been legitimately scheduling a solid team, not thinking Louisville would be this good. And Louisville could have been, like you said, and I'll mention it, kind of cheating the system in scheduling a Big Ten team who is a bottom feeder in the Big Ten. And I'm not going to call Purdue bad. I'm not going to call any of these Big Ten teams bad, except I will say Rutgers is bad. Janarian Grant is a hell of a player, but Rutgers to me is bad. Illinois to me is on the fringe of being bad. I'll say that. I'll call out bad teams. Purdue's not bad. They're not even average to me. They're a below average team, and Louisville's got this ridiculous offense. So there's a reason why Louisville's favored by 27, 28 points. I would take Louisville on the points in that if you're a betting person, because like I said, Louisville's going to score 50 plus. It's just a matter of Purdue kind of keeps that in range with Bluff throwing the ball for 300 yards and scoring garbage time touchdowns. But like you said, it makes an interesting point as to how the schedules are set up. Louisville may have cheated the system in trying to get a Big Ten team because it's a Big Ten team, but they knew it's Purdue, and Purdue likely wouldn't be this, really strong top 25 team because, again, it's Purdue. It's just the way it is, unfortunately.
Right on, Kevin. Let's move on. We got 2 games left. I know that we've been talking all Big Ten. Looking at the clock. I don't even care about the clock. That's the great thing about this show. Now, we could talk for another 3 hours, but we're not going to. Don't worry, fans. We're going to get her done. We're going to get to the end of this schedule. We got 2 games left. Kevin, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, and hats off to the fans I know we're over an hour at this point, even though I dropped my call from before, but we're over an hour for sure. Hats off to the fans still listening. 2 games left, Nebraska, Arkansas State. I left this one as one of the last ones because it just leads up to a big game. But so Nebraska's at home against Arkansas State. And like I said, Nebraska lost their best defensive player in the preseason, off-season, whatever you want to call it, to injury. He's out for the year. So it'll be interesting to see, I guess, Nebraska's defense and their coordinator and their defensive backs coach and head coach will be intrigued to see how you do against a bad opponent. Try and fix everything you can while you're playing teams like Arkansas State. I expect Nebraska to win. You're at home, even if it's at Arkansas State. I expect Nebraska to win. I'll say this, that Nebraska is favored by 19. It's not like they're favored by 30. But Nebraska is an above-average football team. That's how I see them. you lost your top defensive player. It doesn't matter against Arkansas State, but you're trying to figure out everything you can before you play teams like Wisconsin and, whatever other top-end Big Ten teams you play. I know Nebraska has to play Wisconsin, Northwestern. Those will be a couple of their biggest games, and without Jerry at safety, it's going to hurt. And playing Arkansas State early, it's going to help them going forward, unfortunately, playing a cupcake. But you want to figure out your defense while you can before you play against these good teams. I expect Nebraska to win by 27, 28 points.
Yeah, glorified scrimmage for Nebraska to be 1-0 right here, Kevin. I mean, I can't even fathom Arkansas State pulling an upset on this game. Nebraska is a good team. I know they lost Jerry at safety, but Nebraska is still a very solid team. This is a team with high expectations. Again, everybody knows my view on the cupcakes. They scheduled a cupcake, so be it. It's part of college football. They're using it for tune-up. Nebraska's a program where you look at it, they need to get the early season wins. They need to get that confidence because they play in the Big Ten. They've got some really big games on their schedule this year. But for Nebraska and me, Kevin, this game is a glorified scrimmage. Nebraska will be 1-0.
Yeah, and I've got to say this. I misspoke before. I keep saying Jerry because Nate Jerry was a linebacker, and he played at Nebraska like a year or 2 years ago. I keep saying his name instead of Chris Jones. It's a cornerback. There's a safety they're replacing Jones with. They're supposedly replacing Aaron Williams, a safety, with this Chris Jones guy. Chris Jones is supposed to be one of the top defensive backs, cornerback, I guess, if you want to be specific with it. But Chris Jones is the guy being injured, not Nate Jerry. Nate Jerry's a player from Nebraska 1 or 2 years ago who's in the NFL now. But that's where I get confused with all these different names and learning all these different names leading up to the season, who's getting hurt. And I misspoke when talking about a former good Nebraska defender with a current really good Nebraska defender. So my apologies for those, again, still listening, but we will move on to Michigan and Florida. Michigan is ranked number 11. Florida is ranked number 17. This game is being played at AT&T Stadium in Texas, Jerry's World. So it's, Florida's obviously closer to the venue, but Michigan is Michigan. It's Jerry's World. You're going to get a ton of Michigan fans. You're going to get a ton of Florida fans. It's going to be a heck of a game. It's 3:30 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday, again, September 2nd, week 1 of the college football season. Florida had 7 guys suspended. We talked about that, I think, a week ago, Troy. Florida's top receiver from a year ago is back, and he, or at least their leading returning receiver from a year ago is back, but he got suspended. He's the key guy of those 7 guys to get suspended from a couple weeks ago with that incident we went over in last week's show, which, again, you can find at thegruelingtruth.net. But Florida's missing a few guys. One of note, a wide receiver, Antonio Callaway. Michigan, again, number 11 team going against the number 17 team in Florida. Florida not historically, but the last 5 or so years has struggled to get an offense going. That's not changing. I don't remember exactly who their supposed starting quarterback is supposed to be, and Michigan has the same issue where they're not even 100% sure who the starting quarterback is going to be. Spate from a year ago is a solid one, but Michigan's, with Jim Harbaugh, you're getting these top-end recruits at quarterback. So there are quarterback questions for both these teams. Michigan is what they are. You're going to have basically a new defense, but it's a talented defense. Florida always has a good defense, no matter who you lose to the NFL. For both these teams, it's going to be a defensive battle. It's going to be tough to score. I like Michigan over Florida because I think Michigan can score it better than Florida can. But this is one of those games that's going to be fun to watch if you're a defensive guy. And it's the number 1 Big Ten game in terms of just pure, this Big Ten team is going against this team. And both these teams are good, but both will probably struggle to score this year.
This is the penitentiary game, Kevin. All these suspensions, all these bad guys, all these bad dudes getting suspended. And it's kind of disappointing when you think about it because it's such a marquee matchup.
You got an early season top 25 game, and you'll hear me over the course of the show. When I say a top 25 game, it means both teams are in the top 25. And this is a top 25 game. You got two very solid programs looking to get some wiggle room. This is a big game for the future of the season, where their season could be at the end of the year. And one of these teams will look back and say, man, if we would have won that opening day game, where would our season be? It could very well come down to that. It's so important in the Big Ten. Every game matters. We've talked about it on this show. That's the neat thing about college football. Yeah, you can have one blemish on your record if you're ranked in the top 10. For Michigan, they can't really afford to have too many blemishes. This is a very important game, I think, in the sense that the expectations and the division that Michigan plays in, Kevin, and where they're ranked, if they have any aspiration to even sniff the playoff, and I'm not saying they're going to. I don't think they have as much talent to be able to get into the playoff. But again, if the chips fall into place and all of a sudden you are better than a Penn State or an Ohio State on any given Saturday, who knows what will happen. But for Michigan, this is a huge game. And it's still huge for Florida, too, don't get me wrong. Where they're ranked, they probably want to prove to the world that, hey, maybe we're better than 17. And to be honest, Kevin, I think they are. I think they're more up in that 12-13 range. But, hey, they came out at 17. And, again, I'm not big on these preseason polls. Nobody's played a game yet. But if somebody's going to ask me, what do you think about Florida? I like Florida. I think this is a team that maybe is not getting as much respect as they should. I think they're going to go out and want to show the world. It's going to be a heck of a game. Unfortunately, a lot of suspensions. And that, to me, takes some of that allure away, especially with the Michigan guys. So what happens here? Is Florida going to all of a sudden win this game and then Michigan's guys come back? I don't know. But a lot of suspensions. But I think it's going to be a good game. And it is the marquee matchup. And there we go, Kevin. We have just went over the first weekend in the Big Ten. And, oh, my, how much fun was that?
Oh, I know, and it's week one, and I've got more to say about it. But, I don't even know where to start. We've probably been talking for an hour and a half. Like I said, my call dropped out, so I don't have the full amount of time on my phone right now. But that's week one, and that's with multiple cupcakes going on. So when you've got Big Ten teams playing each other, and obviously we won't have, 12, 13 different games to talk about. We'll have 6, 7, but we went in-depth, kind of as in-depth as you want, unless you're an in-depth, Rutgers guy or a huge fan of, we talked in-depth about a lot of these games, but for some of the ones that we didn't, you can't ask for too much more. If you're looking for in-depth Washington-Rutgers preview, this just isn't the show for it. We're going to give the average Big Ten fan, the average college football fan, what you need to know about Washington against Rutgers. And we'll go in depth about Wyoming, Iowa, if there's a special little story in there about it. But we talked a ton just about week one in the Big Ten college football and, not going too in depth about any of these Big Ten teams, but in depth enough to cover at least an hour and a half. But this Michigan-Florida game, everyone talks also about Michigan and how you've got, I think it's one returning starter from defense, either one or none. But you've got five-star guys like Rashawn Gary who weren't quote-unquote starters from a year ago, but he's the number one recruit in the country 2 years ago. So he's, as a sophomore now, supposed to kind of dominate. This is his first year starting, second year in college football, number one overall recruit. Michigan's got a ton of talent, and Florida's got a lot of talent, and neither of these coaches are willing to say who their quarterback is for week one of the game because everyone's curious as to who it'll be, which, again, points to both these teams having good defenses. It's going to be tough to score. It'll be interesting to see how this game unfolds on both sides of the ball for Michigan in particular, since we're a Big Ten show. Who wins the quarterback battle? How do the quarterbacks do? I would be surprised if just one quarterback plays in this game, and the same for Florida. But I expect Michigan to win because I think they're slightly the better team, although you said, Troy, you think Florida's probably close to that 12 range, and Michigan's ranked 11th. You talked about Michigan and their college football playoff hopes. If you have any whatsoever, you got to beat Florida because you have games at Penn State and at Wisconsin and at home to Ohio State to end the year. So you've got a lot of tough games if you're Michigan, and it all starts with Florida. If you have a quarterback controversy, which you do, and you're Michigan, if you can figure it out game one, please do, because you've got a lot of games later on in the schedule where you're going to need to not have a question at quarterback. So this is why I don't like teams like Wisconsin and Michigan as much, because there are so many really high-powered offenses in the top 10, and if you want to call it top 11 where Michigan is, that it's just tough to see Michigan and Wisconsin beat these top 10 level teams on a consistent basis. So to start the year, you've got number 9 Wisconsin and number 11 Michigan. I don't know if they end up there, although, again, we're talking about schedule, and Wisconsin could be the number 3 team in the country by the end of the season, and the number 3 seed in the college football playoff, number 2 seed, undefeated in the Big Ten. Maybe you're number 1 if everyone else loses out, and Wisconsin just kind of goes through their schedule easily. I don't think they will, but they have the opportunity to. So there's just so much to look for in the Big Ten, and not just the top, not just the bottom. In the middle, talking about teams like Northwestern, in short, this week 1 show was fun to do, and once these Big Ten teams start playing against each other, once we know more about these teams, like I said, the head coaches don't know as much as you're going to know once week 3 rolls around, once week 4 rolls around. And we always talk about the rankings and how it's ridiculous to have rankings before you get into conference play. There's so much stuff to talk about with college football. We just talked about week 1 for at least an hour and a half, probably pushing on 2 hours now. And we could talk, obviously, more in depth about these teams. But in short, it was fun, Troy. I'll finally shut up, let the listeners be able to leave, and can't wait for this opening week in college football. Can't wait to do this show with you 1 week from now.
Yeah, well, I could continue to talk if I really wanted to, but I'm looking at the time. And I know we try to keep it an hour. It's just hard when we had to go through every Big Ten game. Like you said, the show will be condensed down to about an hour and 15 minutes on a weekly basis because it'll be, Big Ten. But I would imagine the next 2-3 weeks, Kevin, it'll be a little bit longer show because there's more games. There's not teams in the conference playing each other. I do want to say this, though. You mentioned Wisconsin could vault to the top of the rankings, 1, 2, 3, somewhere up there, and vice versa. Kevin, Michigan, by the end of the year, could be out of the top 25. What if they lose to Florida? What if they lose to Wisconsin? What if they lose to Penn State? What if they lose to Ohio State? That's 4 losses. That may knock them out of the top 25. I know they'll be against top 10 teams, but when you look at it, a loss in week 1, even to a Florida, if they would lose this weekend, Florida's 17, they're 11. I would imagine they're pretty much going to flip-flop spots in the ranking.
Right.
They're going to fall down into the middle teens, 16, 17, 18. They won't fall out of the top 25 because they lost to a top 25 team. But now you're staggering right around that top 20 mark. And, okay, you lose to, a Penn State. Yeah, it's a top 5 team, but still it's a loss, and maybe you hold steady. But if teams are winning behind you, they might vault ahead of you, and all of a sudden, at the end of the year, we could be talking about a Michigan team that's pretty good, but not even in the top 25, Kevin. That's all I'm going to say.
No, yeah, and I guess my last words for this week's show is I'm with you. I mean, we think that Michigan's a pretty dang good football team, and we think Wisconsin's a pretty dang good football team. We don't think that even though their schedule leads them to potential, top 2, top 3 rankings at the end of the year for different reasons. Michigan and Wisconsin, I guess that's the point I was trying to make. They don't, it seems like to me anyway, at the start of the year, which obviously things can change, but at the start of the year, I just don't think Wisconsin's as talented as some of these other top 10 teams. Same thing with Michigan. Not to take away from them, but there's just a lot of really, really strong offenses this year in the top 10.
And Kevin, I even said before the rankings came out that Wisconsin was not a top 10 team. If you remember that. I said that, and again, I'm a Badger fan. I want them to go undefeated. I want them to be in the National College Playoff. I just don't think they're that good as far as comparatively to top 10 talented teams. They're a good team. Don't get me wrong, and I'm a diehard Badger fan. But I'm just realistic about the talent on this team. Too many question marks on defense. Offensively, they're average offensively. They need to win the time of possession battle, and they're not a team that can come from behind. I know I keep talking about the Wisconsin Badgers because that's my favorite team. But you know what, Kevin? It's been fun, and I can't wait. It's only going to get better.
Yeah. My last words, I could see if things go terribly wrong for Wisconsin, you lose games like Nebraska, you lose a potential game against BYU who's decent, who receive votes to get in the top 25. You lose a game against Northwestern. We all think it's possible. It's not out of the realm of possibility. If Wisconsin shows that they're a 3-loss team and you have no really strong wins to back it up because their schedule, that ends up hurting them. Maybe Wisconsin's out of the top 25. I think that's a possibility as well. But Wisconsin, Michigan, tough to score. If you do it your way and you win games, the schedule leads you to believe that these teams can be in the college football playoff. I just don't consider them in the same likes as other top 10 teams. But it's going to be interesting to see where both of them end up because of their schedules and to see how good they actually are. We may not know until the end of the year, but these are 2 top 11 teams right now that could be in the college football playoff. They also could be out of the top 25.
It's time to let the listeners go, Kevin, because really we could continue this conversation into the wee hours of Tuesday morning. So we are done, folks. We are done over for the youngster, the engaged youngster. I am Old Man Troy. Thanks for listening in, folks. We'll get back at you next week previewing week 2, wrapping up week 1 of NCAA college football. Have a great week, everyone.